Welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And every time you think you've kind of accomplished or found everybody along the path, other people keep popping up along the way. Authentic, creative musicians who have cobbled together a career in sustainability in a live musical setting and also in the studio. And a dear friend of mine hit me to this group that came out of Nevada in the 70s called Logos, and I'm looking at it and I recognize that the leader is this cat who is my guest, and I said, wow, I've never heard of that guy, and you know, I've gone back and tried to I've interviewed Greg Douglas and Tim Barnes, and I didn't get to Nino Reggiarello, but and John Cipollina left us, but I've tried to, I've done a couple interviews with Mario, and this guy was right in that milieu, and has continued on today, working with cats like Michael McDonald, but he recognizes that really the success of any true artist is cutting through the morass of what everybody else is trying to do, being individual, being unique, and being singular. Bernie Chiaravalle, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Oh, thanks, Jake. Nice to be here. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, man. I just wanted to play you. We have a game on this program called Name That Voice, and I don't expect you to know who this is, but just take a listen to the content, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Okay. It's African based. It's definitely an African phenomenon. But you don't have to be African American to play it, but you have to understand that it comes from that culture.
Can you be more specific about how it's African based?
Well, it's derived from the way black people hear music, and from the way they compose forms like work songs and hollers and field hollers, and ultimately it evolved into the blues, and the blues was pretty much the foundation of all the forms in jazz that became expressed by composers like Billy Strayhorn and Duke Ellington, etc., Fletcher Henderson, etc. But it was not just a blues like people might think of the blues as, I don't know, B.B. King or something relatively simple. And the blues evolved out of a very long period of suffering by African American people, and then it was like out of a muddy, wet, dank swamp of culture.
Yeah.
These beautiful flowers from that, they were fertilized by that life of complexity and difficulty, and these beautiful flowers of music.
Bernie, you want to take a guess at who that is?
The voice sounds familiar, but I don't know.
That was my first interview with the late, great Larry Coryell. And I asked him,
okay.
My question was his concept of what jazz is. And because, me and you could walk down the street together and ask people what that term means, and we get 20 different answers. And I, from your earliest times, not that, you were trying to be Kenny Burrell or Joe Pass, but I just, I wanted you to talk a little bit about what your concept of jazz is.
Well, I have many friends now and when I was coming up that were definitely jazz players. I confess that when I was younger, jazz went over my head, honestly. It wasn't until I got older and learned more about music that I came to appreciate jazz. And I still don't consider myself a jazz player by any means. I've never taken a lesson in my life. Everything I've learned from other players, and thankfully, I did know some great jazz players, and still do, that I constantly learn from. But I think jazz is it's a very emotional. It's brainy, it's intellectual, but it's also very emotional. And the more I understand it, the more I get the emotion out of jazz. And, I think it's rooted in blues, like Larry pointed out, like almost all music is. But, jazz is something that I'm thankful that I've been able to learn techniques and understand the inspiration of jazz that creeps into my writing and my playing all the time. But it's not really where I'm rooted.
What I'm saying is that to me, I don't know what jazz has turned into today. It seems to be more of a presentation of technology or facility or, the complexity of tunes. We're just in a very chops-driven, facility-driven time, and the only jazz that I listen to is urgent, burning, spiritual music. It doesn't have to be free music like Albert Ayler, but it has to be burning. There has to be an urgency to it. I wonder if you had opportunities to see Van Morrison playing saxophone with Steve Mitchell and John Allaire at the Lion's Share. I mean, the point is that, like, within the milieu of that Bay Area scene, everybody was, there was jazz inflection everywhere. Martin Fierro. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about the experiences you had. Charles Lloyd was playing in his underwear at the Keystone Corner. Can you talk a little bit about the exposure you had to some of the, these masters were healers. You know that. I don't need to tell you that. So who'd you get exposed to?
It's funny you mentioned Van Morrison because my band Logos that you mentioned, we actually opened for Van Morrison at I think it was Litchfield's. It wasn't Pepperland. It was the one next to it, Litchfield's, down on Francisco Boulevard. There.
Wait, hold on. And you mean in San Rafael?
Yeah.
Wow, that is legendary, man. Are you kidding me?
No. And the funny part about it is that Van insisted, like we did our opening set, and I think Clover was on the bill as well.
Yeah.
And Van insisted on all the stage lights be turned off during his show. And he turned his back to the audience and never looked at the audience through the whole set.
That is so Miles Davis, dude. That's so Miles.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? But that's my recollection of Van Morrison. We just thought it was, I was a kid back then. I just kind of went, what do you mean you don't look at the audience? I mean, what's up with that? And I think the audience was sort of taken back by it. But of course, musically, he was brilliant. And I have a few dear friends that were in Huey Lewis and the News, and at the time they were Soundhole. You probably know about them.
Oh my God.
And they backed up Van for I think a year or two. I'm not really sure, but
there's some phenomenal footage from London. You talking about like Bill Gibson and those? Who are you talking about?
Oh yeah, Bill Gibson, Johnny Cola, at least John and Bill. I think John Ferret, their keyboard player at the time.
Wow.
Not sure who the guitar player was at that point. It might have been Brian Marnell, but definitely Bill Gibson and Johnny Cola, and I think Mario was playing bass for them.
Oh, I mean, I was wondering. I mean, I wanted, like my heart. Mario is I don't know how we got connected very spiritually. We're on sort of like this. I mean, I'm only 43 years old, but I really have tapped into this vein of musicians, and when my buddy sent me this link to this band, I was like, Logos, I was like, this, I mean, you think, it's just like, I was transcribing my interview with Bill Frisell, and he said, like, any great musician, professional musician, I think, the first thing you realize is you're never going to know everything there is to know. It's just impossible. And if you watched masters like Sonny Rollins, Bill Evans, or Benny, they exuded that humbleness in their music. It was you couldn't capture it in a lifetime. And for a layperson that, and especially in like a place where you go to the academy now and it's a chop shop and an assembly line and people are transcribing Elvin Jones solos or whatever, like there's this sort of myth that everything is known. And I just wanted you to talk about that concept that or when you kind of recognize like, okay, I'm not going to be that person, or I'm not going to be that, I'm going to be myself. And I also recognize that I'm not going to go crazy because, like, I'm never going to know everything there is to know.
Well, that's very true. There's always something to learn. I find that even as I grow older, there's always something to learn. But, that was a great time growing up in Marin County and being around. We used to rehearse in a place called Joseph Court, which was in San Rafael, Terralinda to be more specific.
Oh my God!
And we were right next door to, well, they were Sound Hole at the time, which morphed into Hugh Lewis and the Muse, of course. So those guys were friends of mine going way back. I mean, we were literally across the court from each other in an industrial park. We all had garages that we rehearsed in. So,
dude, this is so, Bernie, you're making, wait, hold on. Cause like Mario, when I did my interviews with Mario, he said that like they'd go back. Well, first of all, he was like, I mean, he had a bottle of liquid acid when he was 11 years old. Like the conductor's, the baton looked like a fan blade when he was up there. But he and Gibson would go back, have a beer, smoke a joint, and then just put on like a Stanley Clarke, like fusion music and just be jamming. I mean, can you talk about Logos or the guys that you grab, like what that routine was like? To me, it was like a magical time because, I mean, the real Summer of Love was 66, but by the time you sort of got your feet wet, so to speak, the remnants of it were still there, and the music scene was still percolating. So talk about how you formed that band.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was a huge Beatle fan in the late 60s, and that whole California sound as well, Buffalo Springfield, the Byrds, and then later Motown. But it was an amazing time because there were so many great musicians all around me all the time. There was this guitar player named Bill Burgess who actually played with Sound Hole for a short time. He was this incredible, I would compare him to maybe somebody like George Benson or Wes Montgomery. Just, he had that jazz technique down, and he had these chords that were just like, I never knew that those things existed. So he would, but we'd learn one of his songs, and learning one of his songs was like taking a lesson because all his chord changes were so voiced and so like chords that I never dreamed that existed, like I said. So I learned so much from these players. I mean, I played some shows with Bill Gibson and Johnny Cola and Brian Murnell when they were Sound Hole. They actually invited me to do some shows with them, and I was actually invited to be in their band at one point, but I just couldn't do it at that point in my life. But playing with them and learning their songs was just so life-changing for me to play with these great players. And I've always loved playing with players that are better than me. Makes me want to up my game and catch up, and get better. It just made, back then it was just a great time. It was just live music everywhere, whether we were playing or our friends were playing. You were driven. I never had a doubt that that's what I wanted to do because I was so inspired. It wasn't an easy life. We were poor a lot of times, but the music always drove me. And it was just great to be in that Marin County scene. at that time. It was a very eclectic group of musicians of all kinds of styles, jazz, rock, acid rock, folk, country.
It was, I mean, I wonder about, if you could just talk a little bit about, like, if you were an autodidact. So many cats, that was like the tail end of, like, people, basically listening. I mean, the academy had not sunk its teeth into people. You weren't going to go into $300,000 of debt at 21 years old, walking out of a music school with no guarantee of a gig. There was a much more. Can you talk about your street scholar education and maybe if you were ear trained before you learned to read music?
I honestly don't read music very well.
Yeah.
I've honestly never learned it that well. I can read charts.
But I guess my point is, like, I could care less. My point is that it wasn't a big deal back then. You could figure out by ear.
That's right. And thank God I always did. I mean, my parents, at a very young age, I think I was 8 or 9 years old, they noticed that I was taking an interest in music. So a neighbor of ours was a piano teacher. So I took piano lessons I think I was 9 years old. And the teacher was really frustrated with me. He told my parents, this kid is hopeless. He memorizes the music and doesn't look at the sheet music. So he's hopeless. He's never going to make it. And so, but I did learn enough to make me kind of go, I can figure this out. And my parents, thankfully, they bought me a guitar. And I just, I can remember the day, there was a musician that was in a band called the Ravens. There was a very local band around there. That in the middle of the street, he was probably 4 or 5 years older than me. He showed me my first bar chord, and it changed my life. I mean, we were literally, talk about streetwise, we were literally in the street.
I love it. No, that's exactly what I'm talking. I love the street Scott. You just put it right in the pocket.
And back then you could literally walk, like my friend who was the drummer of the band I was in at the time when I was starting out, he lived a mile from me in the same neighborhood, and you could walk from my house to his, and on a good day you could hear 2 or 3 bands rehearsing in garages. Talk about garage bands. That was the day. Those were the days when there were no computers, obviously, or anything like that. Right. So everything was hands on. And man, I can't tell you the thrill it was to stand outside of a garage, because the garages would be closed most of the time. Sometimes they'd open them and they would play for you, but most of the time they'd be closed, and I would just stand out there and marvel at what I was hearing. Everybody was real basic. Nobody was real that great, but it was a vibe, and we were a garage band too. That's what we, anybody's garage we could get into. We'd get in there and start learning our songs, or learn the latest Quicksilver song, or a Bird song, or whatever. It was a cool time. I mean, these days it's great too, in a different way. But it's nothing like it was back then.
How is it great? I mean, tell me, because honestly, like, I just want to be clear, like, Michael McDonald, I mean, my daughters and I take him to school every day, and we're listening to Peg, and we're listening to these, and I mean, his voice, it's like being in a sanctified church. But to me, what is troublesome is that because ticket prices are so high now, not just for him, but for everybody, that there's such an onus to please the audience. And so you have to play these formula trips and the greatest hits. And that's kind of like why the reason Van turned his back, Miles turned his back, because he didn't want to see people's facial expressions, because it would affect his mood. He just wanted to be focused on creating. And so what I'm saying is, like, aside from the fact that you're not playing upholstered sewers for a month at a time, which actually was a great way to find your own sound, tell me what is great about today's modern scene?
Well, I think what I meant by that was creatively. I mean, I can touch both points on that, but creatively, it's a great time for me as a writer and a recording artist. Technology these days is just amazing what you can do with it. You know, I still record like I'm recording with a tape machine, but digitally, you've just got all these possibilities now that give you so much inspiration. But on the live thing, I get what you're saying, absolutely. But, you know, we live in a different time now. Everything is so corporate. I mean,
It's hard. It's just a travesty. Yeah, go ahead. Continue.
No, but, you know, but I don't go to concerts that much myself just because it's an investment. You know, it's like, I mean, I'd like to see Elton John's last tour, but you can't find a ticket for less than $500, and you're sitting in the nosebleed seats. It's like, you know, that part is horrible. I agree.
And I just want to preface this by saying also, like, I want to say this delicately. I mean, I went to visit my brother in Boise and saw an amazing band. If they ever come through, where are you, in Nashville? Where are you at?
I'm in Nashville.
Yeah, I mean, Circles Around the Sun is an improvisational instrumental group. It is a ferocious band, and you know, it's $20 a ticket, and they're dear friends of mine. They're young, you know, so there's a younger, organic, creative scene which clearly has been decimated by the pandemic. But I mean, the idea that like Dead Incorporated and Elton John and Steve Miller, like, I don't get it, man. Like, I don't know what they're doing. They're getting really wealthy. Journey. It's like, I don't know what, I mean, I truly don't, I would never invest. You'd have to give me a free ticket backstage. I also, because of the fact, you know what, you're going to see a show and you know there's going to be so little spontaneity, so little magic that could possibly occur because everything's on a timer. Everything is just teed up, and then they want to move you in, move you out, and that's the corporate methodology, as opposed to going to the Lion's Share and seeing a 25-minute My Funny Valentine with Steve Mitchell, you know, blowing tubes into his drums. Like, that stuff exists. It exists on a much smaller scale, but that corporate level stuff, and you know what, it's when you conform like that, it has a direct reflection on the consciousness of society as well. Anyway, continue.
But yeah, I mean, my response to that would be, and I agree with everything you're saying, but you know, like, I've been with Michael for 32 years now, and he's an incredible creative force. And not only that, he's a wonderful man, a great friend, but I see the challenges he has. You know, to tour, first off, is very expensive. When you have to pay, like in Mike's case, it's 6 people in the band, but besides himself. So he's got a six-piece band that he has to keep on salary. And he's got a crew of another 8 people, 9 people, including the tour managers. So you're talking about an entourage of about 16, 17 people that he's got to keep on salary. And when you're on tour, you're paying for hotels, you're paying for a tour bus, you're paying for flights. There's a large overhead. And that's talking the U.S. Going to Europe, forget about it these days. And that's why it's become kind of corporate, because it costs so much to tour. And I see this firsthand. And Mike, you know, he's playing average, you know, anywhere from 3,000 seaters and down, you know, to 500 theaters. Right. And, you know, we play small theaters, we play larger theaters. And then if we tour with another act, they can do larger arenas and, you know, make more money. But I see Mike, like, he's had us out on the road, say, for 2 months. And we go out and we do the tour and everything's seemingly fine. But Mike is just breaking even, basically, because the overhead is so high. I sympathize with him, and I don't think it's because he's become corporate or anything like that. Because every night we do shows, and the people I play with are such beautiful musicians. And yeah, we stay to a regimen of the set list, and we do play the ones that please the people, but we also play new album cuts that people have never heard before, because we want to be creative, we want to stretch, we want to do something different, and the people love it. But I see the audiences just eat it up night after night. And when you see that joy of us interacting with the audience, it gives me hope. And I know there's acts like Paul McCartney, who I'm a complete huge fan of. Unfortunately, I can't afford to go and see him because it's just too damn expensive.
But the last time that's, and so let me ask you though, because I love the way you broke that down. I mean, Michael's clearly not starving to death. I mean, he's doing this because he's just lives to play music. How much is it a ticket to go? I mean, is it just because he keeps his ticket at a moderate price so people can afford to go?
Mike doesn't set those prices. He does not set those prices. It's the venues. It's the promoters. It's the Live Nation. It's who it, you know what I mean?
See that? I mean, I don't even want to. You know what? I don't want to go into this rabbit hole right now. It really is I'm just saying, like, I applaud that. I just know my buddies, they went 15, they're playing currently 15 shows, 15 days, LA, San Fran, Portland, Seattle, Bend, Boise, Salt Lake, Colorado. They're sleeping on a tour bus. They have a driver, no hotels. They probably stop off certain places, just to wash up and clean up. And I'm telling you, they'll make a little bit of money, and it's not even from it's not even from the gigs themselves. It's the merchandise table.
Oh, absolutely.
Listen, I mean, listen, I'm just saying, like, I don't know what I just, for the light, I mean, my definition of success, like I said, is as a broadcaster, after 30 minutes on this interview, you can probably tell, there is no other broadcast radio show like this. There's no other podcast like this. I've tried to find my voice. I've done 2,000 radio interviews, published 4 books. I'm trying to be myself. I'm just trying to cut through the morass. And for the life of me, so I don't have millions of dollars, but I don't get it. I don't even get why, knowing that McCartney and Miller and all these guys came up, Journey, and why they would do that is just, I mean, maybe I'm just a dummy, but I think I don't know what they're giving back to society anymore. I really don't.
Well, yeah, this is like you said.
You know what it is? I also want to say something. Like, I am also somebody, I'm very different in the sense that, like, I want to go to a show and I want Lee Morgan and Miles Davis attitude. I don't care if it's a rock concert, where basically their attitude was, listen, we dig what we're doing. And we hope the audience digs what we do. But even if you don't, we're still going to play it because you need to hear it. And that's it. That's the motto. And that's what it was right in your face, man. I mean, the Sons of Champlin, that was the craziest fucking, excuse my language, that was the craziest music in the world. And they were putting it right in your face. Everybody was putting it right in your face. And it was not like you either, because you need to dig this stuff. Anyway, that's, to me, the idea of, like, just rolling out and punching in and knowing you're getting $3,000, and I mean, it's just like, and you know what? I wouldn't care if I didn't feel like we were on the brink of a societal collapse, but I think we're teetering on it, and music is a direct reflection of society. Anyway, you clearly, I got another Name That Voice for you, Bernie. I want to put this in for you, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
It was about the same time. The band I started, the Brogues, with Rick Campbell and Eddie Rodriguez, Bill Winterton, had just broken up, and Gary Duncan had come into that band. So him and I just we tried out L.A., and then he knew Chris Brooks in Frisco, so she let us move in for a while. She knew John and David, John and Jim Murray, rather. David came in after he got out of jail. But we just moved up here and just happened to have a good time.
You want to take a guess at who that is?
It's not Greg Elmore, is it?
Ding, ding, ding. As far as I know, I'm the only cat who's done a radio interview with Greg Elmore. And
Greg was in our band.
Oh, that's why I played it. No, that's why I wanted you to talk. I mean, this is what I wanted to ask you, because you were a young cat. But I've always just tried to ask all the cats this. I don't care if it was Mario or Terry Haggerty or Barry Melton or, I said, who, because, Yorma was a folk cat. Jerry Garcia was a folk, came out of the folk tradition. And I just wonder, in your mind, who was the first? I mean, and Haggerty was the first one to fuse bebop lines in rock music. But who was the first rock guitar player in the Bay? Was it Jerry Miller or was it Cipollina? In your mind, who was the first rock guitar player?
Well, the first to really inspire me, was kind of a tie between John Cipollina and Gary Duncan.
Oh my God! Talk about both those cats. Explain that, because they were different, beautiful, but same band too.
Well, they're absolutely, and I love them both. I mean, they both freaked me out. Gary, to me, was more. I kind of liked his approach a little more than John's, but not in a better or worse way. I preferred his melodic sense. He was a little more jazzy to me.
Totally.
But a rock player. Whereas John was more of like a texture kind of player. He just added these beautiful textures on top of their music. And the frickin' SG was just beautiful. I got to play that guitar once. When I was a kid, we went to Prune Music in Mill Valley, and there was a guitar show there. It was like a guitar, like a display.
Yeah.
And John Cipollina was one of the people there, and he had that SG, that famous SG with the Batman pickguard upgrade.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I walked over to him and introduced myself, and he was just so sweet and so gentlemanly, and said, "You want to play it?" And I just went, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?" So he let me hold it and play it, and I'll never forget looking at that guitar, and down on the volume knobs and the tone, there were like old Mercury head dimes that were glued in there. It was just like, oh my God. And long story short, about 4 years ago, I went to the Rock and Roll Museum in Cleveland, and there's that guitar. When you walk into the museum, John Cipollina's guitar rig, which was like these Standell amps and these big giant horns that he had on the top, and an Echoplex, and his guitar is on display in the lobby of the Rock and Roll Hall. And I just went, oh my God, I can't believe this. I played that guitar. But
it's one of the coolest.
Cipollina,
I mean, dude, that guy because I've been to. Did you know Gino at all? Because I've been to that original house when I interviewed Mario in person, and
no,
Gino was like.
I didn't know Gino.
What about Tom Donahue?
And didn't know him personally either, but I know who he is or was. No, Quicksilver was like, hands down, my favorite Bay Area band. There was nobody better to me. That first Black album with their logo on the front, I wore that thing out probably twice. He used to play Gold and Silver, or I think it was at the name of the jazz team on there.
Sure.
You know, I mean, we played all those songs, Pride of Man. And then when Greg Elmore, many years later, this was probably the early 80s, we were in search for a new drummer, and somehow his name or connection, I don't remember who, maybe it was Soundhole, because, you know, they were friends with him, of course. Maybe it was Mario. I don't remember. But anyway, Greg auditioned for us, which was ridiculous. But, we were a pretty good band. Logos was good. We were tight. We wrote our own songs, and Greg auditioned for us, and we hired him. And he played with us maybe for 2 years. I don't quite remember them. But it took me the longest time to even find the courage to even look him in the face, because I was so in awe of Quicksilver. And there was Greg Elmore playing in our band. I just went, this is too much. But he was such a sweet guy, and so normal, so down to earth, that we got to be friends really fast. And it wasn't long before I asked him, but it'd be too much to ask you if we played Fresh Air. And we did. And he said, yeah, absolutely, let's play it, And he had those drums, the way he had them tuned, they were kind of like John Bonham, big boomy bass drum and big giant, sonic drums he had. Greg was a trip, man. I love Greg. I really, as a person and as a player, such an honor to be a part of, to be in each other's lives there for a little while. Haven't talked to him in years. I'd love to hear from him.
I have his number if you want to connect with him.
I would love that.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I ask because, going back, do you remember where you were when that tragedy occurred with Danny Shalek?
Yes. Yeah. I knew, that's when I first started to know those guys in Soundhole.
Right.
And I knew Brian Marnell because I lived in Novato at the time, and Brian was Novato based as well. And I knew these other guys that were the New Hawk band, and it was Brian Marnell and that guy Bill Burgess that I referred to earlier, and Bill Burgess's brother Steve Burgess, and these guys were jazz cats, but they played like Work to Do and Cool Isley Brother Tone.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
So that really exposed me to that kind of music. But anyway, Brian was in that band, and when Shalek, that whole horrible murder that came down, Brian was a very unique character. He was a great guitar player and great singer. I just idolized Brian. And when he heard that Shalek was killed, Brian, and you'd have to know Brian to kind of get this, but he said, well, it looks like they're going to be needing a guitar player.
Oh, jeez.
So he called them and asked for an audition, and he got the gig. I don't think anybody else was thinking like that at that particular time. Everybody was in shock, but that's what my recollection of that whole era is knowing Brian and him getting the gig in Soundhole after all that happened. It was awful.
This is from my interview with Mario. He said, I've experienced a lot of loss and fought my way out of these holes. When I was in high school, my dearest friend who started Soundhole, he had been my band leader since I was in 5th grade. His name was Dan Shalek. 5:30 in the morning, I got a call. My mom came and woke me up. She said, your brother John's on the phone. I don't know what's going on, but he wants to talk with you. My brother called me from the police station in downtown Mill Valley to tell me that my best friend Dan and both of his parents had been murdered. That morning was one of the worst days of my life. The police didn't know who had done it, and they were looking for leads. I actually ended up at the crime scene and saw them in the condition they had been left in. They had been shotgunned to death.
Lord.
Dan was my best friend, band leader, and guitarist. I was a follower of his. I had never been a band leader. I realized when he died, someone was going to have to pick up where he left off. I wasn't going to get to be a musician. My friends and I weren't going to get to be in a band. I felt this really clearly, and I eventually found a way to accept another guitarist into the band. I learned how to be a band leader, book gigs, take the band as far as I could. Anyway, I just know like the Sons of Champlin they were opening for the Grateful Dead on the East Coast, and they played a gig at Nassau Coliseum, and the next morning they said, you guys are going home, and New Riders of the Purple Sage are going to be opening, and they said, well, what's going on? They told them what happened, and I believe Champlin and Terry Haggerty were pallbearers at the funeral, It was just a really effed up situation, man,
Yeah, it was. It was terrible.
All right,
I hadn't thought about that in years.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I mean, I need you my buddy Drew, who's been a very big force on my journey for the last 10 years, he I really just want you to spend some time talking about this person in particular uh, who has been fascinating to so many of my peers just because there's this black and white VHS show of Jerry Garcia Band from the Capitol Theater in 1980 with this incredibly young, very prolific drummer who then died in a car wreck, Johnny DeFonseca. And I cannot believe, Bernie, that you were in a band. I want you to talk about Logos and Johnny. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Johnny, yeah, I can remember when he started playing with Garcia. He kind of broke our hearts, to be honest with you. But Johnny, of all
Johnny would have been, I mean, would he have been the greatest? I mean, he was 19 years. He was so young. I've never seen a drummer like that. Yeah.
Well, Johnny, you could sit down and show him a song and he would know it the first time through. As a matter of fact, he kind of got worse as it went along because I think he got bored. But his intuition and what he gave to a song just right in the initial hearing of it would just always amaze me. I think Johnny was probably my favorite drummer that I played with back in that era. He was a sweet kid. I'd call him a kid because he was probably 5, 6, 7 years younger than us, maybe. About 5 years younger. He was the sweetest. And, his connection with the Grateful Dead was cool because basically when his father was killed, Johnny D. Sr., and Mickey Hart took Johnny under his wing and was like his godfather, basically. Or he was technically his godfather, but kind of became his father in a way, father figure. And so we got exposed to the world of the Grateful Dead. We went, we recorded at least 4 or 5 songs up at the Dead Ranch up in Nevada, which was pretty amazing. And then, we got to hang out at their place in San Rafael down on the canal area.
You mean down at Club Front?
Yeah.
Oh,
well, this was it was like a warehouse. It was a warehouse. This was years ago, back in the late 70s. The first time I went in there, this will give you an idea of the environment. The first time I went in there, Johnny took me in there. There was a giant film screen, like a big, I don't even know what kind of a screen it was because, that was so long ago. I don't know, but it was a professional movie screen with like the code reading off, and they were scoring Apocalypse Now.
Absolutely. No, I mean, you're just getting hip to my show, but I mean, I've interviewed everybody from the Digger Rhythm Band, and I would assume that the engineer for those tunes you cut in Nevada was Dan Healy.
It was.
Because Dan's favorite, most best friend in the world was John Cipollina. So beautiful. It's so beautiful, man. So I just want to be clear. DeFonseca's dad. Now, who was his dad? Somebody that was, because Bill Vitt, the great drummer. I'm just trying to figure out who Johnny's dad was.
I don't think Johnny's dad was a musician. I'm sorry to say I don't know a whole lot about him. Yeah, it's okay. But I do know that he was a drug smoker, and by drugs I mean pot.
Sure.
And he was a runner, and he died in a plane crash that was supposedly sabotaged by law enforcement. That's how the story goes. I don't know if that's true, but Johnny did die. Johnny Sr. did die in a plane crash that was loaded with pot, and apparently the plane malfunctioned and went down, and he died in a plane crash. That's fact. But other than that, I don't really know much about Johnny D. Sr.
I guess what I'm trying to say is the connection. Mickey had a lot of allegiance because maybe he was bringing weed to the barn or something. I mean, or he knew Johnny.
That's probably what it was. I can't say that factually, but
sure.
That's probably what it was. There was a lot of pod, and Johnny D, Junior,
Yeah.
was always in that world too. It was like it was always the best pod you could imagine. Johnny was part of that.
Dude, Johnny
he was,
DeFonse, I want you to talk about logos. First of all, I need to really, this is a very serious question. Glad to know, regional radio hit. Was there vinyl pressed of logos? I'm having a hard time finding it.
Yes.
Do you have any? I need, dude, DeFonseca's playing with Garcia. This is a 19-year-old kid. Again, obviously he knew the Dead, but his playing is like it's like seasoned. Somehow it's metronomic, but it doesn't feel sterile. I cannot describe it. It's quite remarkable.
No, it's like I said before. He was is about as natural as they come.
Right.
He reminded me a little bit like, even though he was so close with Mickey, his playing reminded me more of Billy Kreutzmann, to be honest with you.
Really? That is such a fascinating comment to me. Billy just strikes me as I don't want this to come off the wrong way, because there's no drummer I love more, but a little bit sloppier than Johnny.
Well, maybe so. But I think just maybe in creative approach. Mickey was more of a percussion player.
Oh, dude, let's be very clear. Let's be very clear here. He just had his birthday. I put up a video on Instagram, and I just said, Mickey, it's obvious that it's very obvious that he was never able to be a traditional trap set timekeeper. He was a ethnic. No. He was a counterpoint percussionist, is what he was.
Well, and I think that's what works so well in that.
Absolutely, no, it gave the Dead a very tribal sound. Absolutely.
But I think my point is that Billy was more of the groove foundation player.
Totally.
And that's where Johnny kind of came in. And Johnny was kind of a combination of them both, really. He was, very groove oriented, but he could put these things on it that you wouldn't think would work. But they did.
So talk about tell me about logo. First of all, I need some copies of, was there actual vinyl cut? And also like I get like Healy had what regional radio was playing logos?
I don't remember the station call letters, but there was a station up in Santa Rosa that was playing this like crazy. It's so long ago, it's hard to remember.
Bernie, this is where the rubber meets the road for the Jake Feinberg show,
Yeah. But anyway, we did that 45. It was just a 45 we did with Mickey, and then we did another 45 as logos. But Johnny wasn't in the band at that point. We had a different drummer. I'm trying to remember who was our drummer at that time. Probably Ross Bell.
Yeah, I'm looking.
And then we did a third. But there's actually a video up there with Johnny playing with us at the College of Marin that we did.
I'm sorry. Where is this video?
It's probably on my website, on my videos page. But it's logos. It's a song called "I Try to Please You," and it's the band at that point when Johnny was in the band.
Are you kidding me? Wait, is it a YouTube clip or?
Yeah, I can send you the link to that.
So I just want to be clear about something. How did you? Because just in general, how did you wind up finding how did the band actually come together? It seems like there was a couple cats from the South as well, and then how did you find? How did you choose Johnny as a drummer?
Well, it was actually quite a bit of transitions along the way, but the root of the band was really myself and my partner John LeBurn. He was a guitar player / bass player, and so was I. We would switch between the two instruments. Mostly he played bass mostly, but it was basically us two with another guy named Mitch Hennard, a drummer, and I'm trying to remember who else, but we just kind of went along. And
John Langford.
Basically, well, that's where I was going next.
Oh, go ahead.
we were playing with this other guy named David Ovidio, who was a drummer, and another guy, Don McLeod, who was a bass player. And I'm not really sure where we met those guys, I'll be honest with you. But they kept telling us about this guy named John Langford that was coming out from Atlanta. And he was literally driving out from Atlanta to move to the West Coast and to join our band. And I'll never forget the day we were in Santa Venetia at Dave Ovidio's house, who was the drummer at the time. And he rolled up in his van. It was like an old, I don't know, like a Ford Econoline, I think.
Right.
And he pulled up in this van, and John was such a colorful character, John Langford, who later became John Harrison. I don't know what happened. He changed his name back to his original last name or something. But anyway, he pulled up in this van, and it was loaded with gear. He had a Hammond organ, he had a Rickenbacker, he had a Mosrite guitar, he had like a Gibson Birdland, and he was just the most colorful character. And we never had a keyboard player, so all of a sudden we had this screaming D3 player in our band.
Damn.
So that was a good band, man. We could make up songs right on the spot, and we could just read each other so well and make up lyrics right on the spot. Those really were unbelievable creative times. But, time went on. Langford went on to form his own band, Timmy, and Logos kind of went in a different direction. And I think Johnny actually came after. No, maybe Greg Gilmore came after Johnny.
He did. No, it was Hennard, and then Ross Bell, and then Johnny,
Bell,
and then Elmore.
Yeah.
I mean, did you with that first band when things were cooking, you were already at Mickey's? You had not met the Dead at that point, though.
Not until Johnny D was in the band.
So how did you? So then when Ross left, how did you run into Johnny?
That's another good question.
I'm just trying to film, dude. You are a conduit. I mean, this is, first of all, I just want to be clear. Like, did you, with the Langford group, did you actually ever cut any records with that group?
Recordings. No, we never did anything professional with that particular band that I can remember right now.
Were you playing like you playing Into the Beginning, places like that, like local stuff? What were you? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. We played Into the Beginning. We played Lion Share. We played Sleeping Lady Cafe a lot. We did, I don't know, over in Berkeley, like I said, Keystone Corner. We played there, And then at some point in the mid '70s, maybe late '70s, we started to play more nightclubs, because we needed to earn a living.
Yeah.
I mean, being an original band was great, and we always strived and made that our top priority to be a songwriting band, but we needed to survive. And I didn't want to do a day gig because all I could think about was music. So we started to play clubs, like top 40 clubs, and probably the worst part of my life, to be honest with you.
Wow.
But we started to make money to be able to support our habit of being.
I just want to be clear. This is a class example of being a. You're talking about you had to play in order to pay the bills. You had to pay top 40 music. You couldn't really play your original stuff in those clubs.
You weren't supposed to, but we did.
Of course, people were so lit up at the end of the night, nobody even knew. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we would always sneak in 2 or 3 originals per set.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
We would learn the bare minimum of covers that we had to because we hated it. And back then the music wasn't that bad. I mean, there was some good music.
Dude, are you kidding me, dude? Top 40 music rocked back then, man. I mean, it was. I mean, it would have been. It would have. Yeah. I mean, did you? Please tell me you have some analog cassettes of the band or some live? Are there? I mean, aside from the video from College of Marin, are there cassette? You have tapes or?
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely material.
Can I hear some? I need to hear some of it, dude. I mean, we got to get this stuff out, man.
Yeah, I can get you some of that stuff. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine who was in Timmy and John Langford's band, Peter Penhollow, just sent me like about 6 or 7 tracks that I haven't literally heard since back then.
Oh my!
It kind of freaked me out. It's like, they're not great recordings.
No, it doesn't matter. Whatever,
It's
man.
there,
Dude, this is so, dude, this is a renaissance time, man. Like, I could not believe, and I guess, but is it fair to say that, again, dealing with tragedy, I mean, that you had to get Elmore because Johnny died in a car wreck, or he was already out of the band?
He was already out of the band, and that's why I made the remark earlier that we were a little heartbroken with Johnny right off, because he started playing with Garcia at a time when we were getting really close to being signed by Bill Graham's production company. We did a showcase with them, and they really liked us. And there was a guy that came that worked with Bill Graham. I forget who he was, but yeah. Anyway, we were so close to signing.
It wasn't Jerry. It was a Jerry Pompili, by the way. Jerry was in charge.
No, I don't think it was.
Yeah,
might have been Rock Scholar. Now that I think
right.
of it, but anyway, Johnny sort of abandoned us, and so we were left without a drummer at a time when we were getting ready to sign a record deal. And it all fell apart. And we were devastated. We really were. And I never saw Johnny ever again after that. And there was no animosity. I mean, we still loved Johnny, but we just never saw him again because he started going to play with Garcia. And the next thing I hear, he died in a car crash. And just awful.
I mean, I'm telling you, man, it's almost, to now know the backstory, not that I'm a prophet or somebody who knows more than anybody else, but when you think about the karma of having a band like yours in ascension, getting ready to possibly sign a record deal, and then ghosting you guys, going off with Garcia, yes, playing for really about a half a year, and that's it, and then he's gone. Of course, the whole lineage of the family with his dad dying, it's a very, when you see him on this black and white video, and he's playing with John Conn in the rhythm section, and he's so relaxed. I can't even imagine what that band, because that would have. I mean, to me, was there a front? Were you the front man? Do you think that? I mean, there's a difference between getting a record deal and then becoming an international known band. But I was just doing an interview. Ironically enough, I'm working on the memoirs with. This drummer Keith Kilgo, who is in a band called the Blackbirds, which was a kind of an R&B and soul band from the early 70s. And ironically enough, he wound up playing with Gary Duncan before he passed away, which is really bizarre. But, the Blackbirds had a lot of success, but they never totally got there. So it's just, I mean, do you believe that?
Yeah.
Was there a frontman? Were you the frontman of the band?
Sort of. I mean, we considered ourselves a band, and we had 2 or 3 lead singers. I probably did most of it, but John was equally as good a writer as I was, and definitely as good or better a singer than I was. But we were both we were kind of the 2 main guys, and then this other guy Dan Bertoldi that we had playing guitar with us for a while, he sang and wrote too, but. Yeah, John and I were the front men. I think I was probably most of the time the driving force behind bands. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those guys that just can't sit still. I want to get things done. So I wouldn't know if that would call me the front man, but I was definitely the slave driver, so to speak. It's like, when you're in a band and you need motivation, obviously. And I was kind of the motivator. I was kind of like when everybody else wanted to go do their thing, I was like, no, man, we need to rehearse. We need to get our show down. We need to learn these songs. We need to record. I was that guy for many years, and it was stressful, but good at the same time. I learned a lot. Being a band is a learning experience anyway. It's all about democracy and fairness, and checking yourself when you're being an asshole.
Totally.
It's like I'm so glad that I did those years, because now being with Michael all these years, Michael's the boss, but all that stuff I learned from being in bands is totally coming into play with being with Mike, because I do well in band situations. I love being in a band. It's a great thing.
Well, and I just, when you think about even popular music today, I mean, it's a lost art. I mean, you don't see bands anymore. Bands were the ultimate thing, and now you see sort of a titular head person. The accompanists are,
Well, yeah, in the mainstream, mostly I think that's correct. But, I'm producing a band. I've produced 2 albums for this band. They're called the Midtones, and they're young guys. They're like 30-ish, and they're totally all about what we're talking about.
Totally, dude. No, I dig it, man. No, and I don't want to paint with a broad. I'm talking at that. I mean, at the pop level,
the mainstream.
You had Edgar.
Absolutely.
You had Edgar Winter, Allman Brothers, The Dead. I mean, there were bands coming out of the. They were seeping out of the sewers. It was all bands back then.
Yeah. Even radio back then. You could put on KTIM or KSAN or whatever the other local stations were in the Bay Area at the time, and you could hear Joan Baez, and then Quicksilver would be the next cut, and then maybe you'd hear Stevie Wonder,
or then you'd hear like you switched on Moog or switched on Bach or so. Yeah, it was Mahavishnu Orchestra into the
exactly
Preservation Hall Jazz Band. It was incredible. I mean, it was so. It was natural.
It wasn't categorized.
Yeah, right. That's the beautiful thing. Yeah. Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. That's gone today. That's where the corporate thing comes in, and it's frustrating as hell. And now don't even get me started on streaming, because.
Well, no, but the other thing is like forget. Yeah, we have to do set 2 immediately, because we've only gotten into 1980, and I want to talk to you about the rest of especially going down to Los Angeles and the studio scene. But I mean, the issue is like. I don't know. I'm just, I'm trying to push that Duke Ellington methodology that it's all music, and then the subjective part is either it's good or bad. The idea that like, they say to you, well, what kind of music you play, and you have to be pigeonholed or, labeled. It's so stifling for new musical vocabulary to be created. And that was what was so beautiful about the time that you came up with in the 70s, is that in the time you didn't maybe necessarily know it, but everybody was experimenting in a very fluid scene without the restrictions of, you had freeform radio, and I just know in 69, I've interviewed so many of the jazzers that Tootie Heath was playing with Herbie Hancock, and they opened for Iron Butterfly. This was what was. It kind of got lost in the audience. It was an acoustic jazz group, but still, it's like that's what we need. And I just don't think corporate America is going to get it, because for them, it's only a bottom line thing.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit before we wrap up set 1 here. A little bit about some advice to, like I said, I just saw my buddies who are choosing to do a 15-day, 15-show run. They're a great, sounds like the group that you're working with, very driven. They have those guys in the band that, everybody plays a role. They definitely have the slave driver, they have all that stuff. And the music is totally danceable and beautiful. But there's a lot of musicians who don't want that lifestyle. And there's also a lot of musicians that were creatives that were working on a certain circuit. And since the pandemic, that circuit has been blown up. And so there is no domestic touring circuit right now. It's maybe for the big names, okay? But I guess my question is, your advice to younger cats who, all I know is if somebody took a microphone away from me for 2 years, I'd be in kind of a bad psychic place. And for cats that have not been able to be on the bandstand, and they're sort of teetering between dark and light, can you give them
Yeah.
some inspiration, or maybe reflect back on a time when you faced some adversity in your life and didn't think you were going to get out of it, but you did, and you're still here and you're still thriving today?
Well, that's a hard one. I mean, yeah, it's been devastating for so many of us. Yeah, I mean, my touring thing with Mike has been nil. I haven't done a show with Mike in like 18 months, I guess.
Really?
Now.
You've been off the road that you haven't done one show? Interesting. Wow.
No, we haven't done one. But I'm at a point in my life where I'm able to support myself as a songwriter and as a musician, studio wise, where I can keep moving and keep afloat. As far as giving advice to people, you know, be happy in life. Whether it's music or whether it's your people you're around, the people you love, I'm always been really grateful that I have a desire to be a songwriter and a singer-songwriter and a recording artist, I guess I'll call myself.
Sure.
I'm addicted to the studio. I can't really go a day without getting in my studio and working on something that I'm working on, a new creation, or whether it's a song that somebody sent me and they want me to put my contribution on it. You know, make sure you love what you're doing, because you're going to run into valleys and peaks and holes where it's not going to be good. I mean, because I've been through plenty of those over all these years. I mean, living in my car, you know, living in a rehearsal studio with no shower. You know, it's like I'm not playing the tiny violins or anything here, but
no,
like,
during the when you think back to that, it was just the driving force of, because you loved.
I just knew
that
I just knew that I had to do it. I mean, and I feel fortunate that I've always had that built-in drive. There was like no question in my mind that this is what I was going to be, even if I had to live with nothing.
Right.
If I had to sacrifice my lifestyle, you know, as I get older, I'm less tolerant of that stuff, but it's because, you know, I've gone through stuff and I've gotten to a point where I can coexist. And my wife, you know, she's working down the street, and we're able to survive because we're both able to pull in enough money to keep us afloat, you know, and live, knock on wood, pretty well.
Yeah.
We live a good life.
Yeah.
But all I can say is for advice, make sure you know that you love being a musician, and that you are ready to accept that it's going to be good and it's going to be bad. And when it gets bad, you're going to have to hang in there if you want to get to the good. And the good will come if you're good and you're in the right place at the right time, and you stay at it. But, you know, learn to record, learn to write songs, you know, explore that creative part of yourself. Don't just rely on playing live or on other people. Be self-sufficient, you know. That's my advice.
Man, no, I mean, you know, and it will turn around. It's amazing, you know. Obviously, you know, back in the days of Woody Herman and Duke Ellington playing 250 dates a year. I mean, before the pandemic, and I'm talking about my peers and creatives, nobody was getting rich, but they were incredibly busy. A lot of gigs, a lot of touring, very active touring circuit. And the one industry that is completely stopped, I mean, with minimal engagements, is live domestic touring. And I just feel like that is a very music is a healing force, and it's not a formula trip. It's not meant to sit there and clap when you don't even like the song. It's meant for liberation, and it's one reason the overall universal vibration is so low right now. Is just, you know, I took it for granted before, but every city and every city and every capital in the world was consistently having live music all the time. and it would raise that vibration. And now it's not, and it's disconcerting because it just seems like you're not sure exactly when it's all going to come back around. But yeah, I mean, you got to go for it, and I think that idea of saying no matter what, I'm going to stay on this path is very salient, man. So, Bernie, maybe we can do part 2 next week, man.
Yeah, it sounds good to me, man. Sounds great. I've enjoyed talking.
Yeah, man. It was a ball. I knew we were going to have a ball, man. It was great. I'll have this up later today, and any logos availability, I just want to hear some of that music, man. Preferably with John.
Yeah, I'll send you some links of that stuff. Absolutely.
Thank you, Bernie, and much love to you, man. I'll be in touch.
All right, same to you, buddy. You take care of yourself.
All right, dude. Later on.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Now, thanks to Drew Cressman, Bernie Chiaravalle, another great interview in the book. It's a lot of insightful information. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show, and we'll see you later.